Welcome to NAT. My name is Paul Spanos, and today my guest is from United States, Dr. Peggy Poteet, and she is the chair of the Department of English, a division of Cultural and Communication Studies at Southern Nazarene University in Oklahoma. Did I say all of that right?
You did say that right.
Welcome.
That's correct.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Can you talk to us about yourself? Where were you born and where you grew up and how you end up being in education field?
All right. I was born in Los Angeles, California, but I grew up in Northern California, just outside of San Francisco.
Beautiful place.
And yes, it is. Yes, my family goes way back for generations of living in San Francisco, so it's a very important place. I probably started teaching in our garage with the kids in the neighborhood. I think I can remember that was one of the things we played teacher, and it's something that I always enjoyed doing.
That means it came naturally to you to go into teaching profession.
I think it did. Okay. Yes, it's where I feel most at home and most fulfilled. It's something I love to do.
Okay. And did you find it challenging when you went to follow university and then to be a professor today?
Challenging today to teach the students of today.
Okay.
Yes. I've been teaching quite a while, and students have changed in the last 20 years.
Can you explain to that a little bit more?
Well, some people blame it on Sesame Street. I don't know if that's fair or not, but these are our students that are quite tied to texting and laptops, and the challenge is learning how to use those things for the advantage of education. And also, it seems as though the attention span is a little bit shorter, and so that means that you have to plan your time with them accordingly to keep them engaged in what they're doing.
That means the method has changed,
yes,
obviously.
Yes, it has.
The method has changed. Do you think the ability of learning and or the capacity for us to sustain those concepts or traditional concepts about in ethics in the society, have they changed those as well, apart from the method and the mechanism of learning? I think so.
I think that there is a view of a more relative morality that we have in this world that perhaps one thing that a teacher can do is challenge a student to think through how they come about deciding what is integrity for them and why they do what they do and what a moral thing might be. As sometimes, perhaps in past generations, we could assume certain moral codes.
Yes.
I don't think we can assume those anymore. And if we feel like they're important, then we probably have to be more proactive in articulating those codes.
It means when we're talking about morality, the definition of good and what is good and definition of what is bad has changed, has shifted, isn't it?
Perhaps it has. Perhaps it has. And maybe in one way, at least what I find important at the basis of my worldview would be the value of the human individual that God has created. And that sometimes people value themselves alone rather than thinking of how what they do impacts the people around them.
Okay, that means the individualism in our days has impacted even the way we learn things or the way we accept things in education.
I think so, at least in our country, because we also value individualism, and I think Australians do as well.
Yes, that is correct.
And it's not a bad thing.
Yes.
But also, I think it's important to realize again how the choices that you make do have an impact on your culture. And that's an important thing to see.
That's right. Even though we talk about a lot of democracy nowadays, at the same time, the extremes of individualism push extremes in the society as well. So, yes, in relation to your connection to Australia, how did you connect with this country?
Well, my husband's a basketball coach, and I have been to many places in the world because of basketball.
Aren't you lucky?
Yes, in some ways, although I probably have seen more gymnasiums in Australia than I have museums, and I would really like to flip that.
We do have museums.
Yes, you do.
That. Okay.
Yes, in fact, we just visited in Canberra the World War II memorial and museum, and that was just a wonderful place.
That is a very good one. Yes.
We really enjoyed it.
Very good ones.
Right.
Very well designed.
But I've been to more gymnasiums.
Oh, you've been to more gymnasiums. I think possibly you can influence your husband to go to different sites where the museums
trying.
Are. Okay,
yes, I'm trying to do that.
Thank you for being with us. You're watching NAT, and we'll come back to you after the break. Welcome back to NAT. We'll continue our conversation with Dr. Peggy Poteet. How you would evaluate education in our days?
Well, I guess my experience, I would just have to say, I could focus on my own experience in the United States, and the kind of school that I teach at is something that I'm a real proponent for, and that is a liberal arts education where a student is more than indoctrinated, but they're really educated, and they learn about many different areas, not just a skill that might become passé in 5 or 10 years, but they're able to change with the culture because they learn how to think critically, and they learn how to write, and they learn how to read analytically, and those skills cover so many different areas that are important in one's adult life.
That means the education includes the exposure to different cultures.
Exactly.
And how to value different cultures.
Right.
Do you find difficult to pass this message to, for example, to a person who hasn't been exposed but to a single culture?
Actually, I think I have the perfect major in order to do that, because I think literature is like, some people call it a window to the world, in that it can take you to Afghanistan, or it can take you back to the 19th century, or it can take you very many places that perhaps you haven't been. For example, I was thinking about some things that I thought my students were probably not aware of at all, and one of them was the whole era of apartheid in South Africa. And so we read together a book by Alan Paton called Cry the Beloved Country, a classic work. And it was amazing to hear, after they had read that and written about it and done some research, what they said about how I never realized that that kind of thing happened. I never realized that that existed, and they probably knew very little, if anything, about South Africa at all. And so I think literature opens that kind of door. African American literature is one area that I like to teach, and students can read a slave narrative, for example, and find out firsthand what was it like to live in the days of slavery and to experience that that horrendous kind of life. It gives them compassion, and it also opens them up to people's stories that we need to listen to.
Absolutely. And I think nowadays, within the same countries, we find that there are conflicts amongst the ethnic groups within the same boundaries, the same country areas. So there is a real value of passing on not just the literature, but also the cultural, the whole life experience, being or belong to a different ethnic group or a different side of the world or something.
Right.
So, and that is incredible. Have you seen what is it that really makes you like that sort of work, to get involved and educate people in that sort of area, cultural, intercultural education, if you like?
Well, I love, of course, I love my subject, but I think the most important thing when you're a teacher is that you love your students. It doesn't matter how much you know if you really don't love them and value them, and if you don't know how to approach them, then it doesn't matter how much you know. It's not going to have an impact on them. And so it's just fun for me to introduce them to things that they haven't known before, or to teach them skills in writing, for example, that I know will be helpful to them in the other classes they'll take, and perhaps in their career as well.
I like what you said, loving students, and then the subject becomes sort of automatically, because part of your skills, isn't it? But loving students first is very, very incredible, because you can see them grow, isn't it?
Oh yes, and I was just thinking about a friend of mine, and before our son was born, I was toying with the idea, well, should I continue to teach or not? And she encouraged me, and she said, you know, you'll be a better teacher.
Okay.
His name's Joshua.
Okay.
And she said, you will know that the students you have are someone else's Joshua. And that has really helped me to know that, you know, this is someone's child. And I want to help them and treat them the way I would want someone to treat my child.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I have to admit, the ethics in our society, I found a lot of problems in education coming from how to earn more money or save more money, or how to we have a tendency of talking about education in business terms, but there's a lot of inside us in our humanity that we need to learn and know, and somehow parts of our society we have a tendency of forgetting those values.
Right.
Do you find that the values in society have been shifted?
I'm sure they have, and when I deal with students trying to decide, well, what do I want to major in? You know, sometimes they'll say, well, doctors make a lot of money, maybe I want to be that. Or business sounds like you're going to make a lot of money, you may or you may not.
Yes.
And I always tell them that I've had the privilege of having the kind of job where when I wake up in the morning, I want to go there.
Yes.
Now, I don't make as much money as probably most of the students that I've taught, but ultimately, that really hasn't been as important as enjoying what you do and feeling that it makes an impact on someone's life, and that what you do will live beyond your life.
Absolutely.
That's important to me.
And I can see a smile in your face when you describe these things. Obviously, you have some positive sort of examples in your life. Is it something that really something you remember that you can see a profound impact in somebody's life through the growth in education?
Well, there are many examples of that. Sometimes when I usually meet students when they come in as freshmen, and they might be 17, 18 years old. And some of them have had the gift of a good secondary education prior to that, and some of them haven't.
Okay, if I interrupt this one to have a break, and we'll continue on this example.
All right.
Okay, thank you for staying with us. We'll be back to you with NAT shortly. Welcome back to NAT. We continue with Dr. Peggy from United States that is with us today. And we're talking about education and the practical impact to people, and how you have seen people grow in that process of education. And we'll continue on that. What is your impression when you see people grow, and if you have any example?
All right. One of the rewarding things sometimes is to be able to see students as they can become rather than as they are, even though you have to work with them where they are, to see the potential in them that perhaps they don't even see themselves. And there are a lot of students that have the ability to go to university and do very well.
Yes.
There are some where you wonder, well, should they be there or not? And yet within them are some of the abilities that the other students have. They just haven't had the advantage perhaps of the kind of family they came from, the kind of secondary education they had. And it's interesting to see those sort of diamonds in the rough, and to see them grow, and to see them walk across the stage with their cap and gown, and to see them graduate and be successful in their careers. A number of the students I have end up being teachers themselves, and so I enjoy watching them sometimes as I visit their classrooms and seeing them do the kinds of things that I hope they would be able to do.
That sounds like you discover within your students, within their hearts, within their life, you discover some important, beautiful skills that they've got, and you help them out to surface them, and being able to be themselves, but at the same time, the learning process helps them to shape and form and be useful in the society, I suppose, that they can enjoy as well, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. We touched before about the importance of education and impact, and you mentioned about you can have the business person there, and people have different reasons to educate themselves, but beyond anything else, talking about different cultures, the ability to communicate better, because we are interested of educating ourselves, is important, isn't it? Even in business, even if you do something not in literature, but to know how to communicate is important, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think that's why it's important that part of a student's education is some kind of cross-cultural experience, which we try to have. We take students to different countries and let them experience different ways of looking at the world, different ways of living. Those things are extremely important. And again, literature is something that can do that for you, because you can get into the mind and the world of another culture through their literature, and gain an understanding that you would not have otherwise.
Absolutely.
And I thoroughly enjoy that. I'm trying to do that with Australia right now, and doing some reading about the early days of the country.
We do have some nice settlements, original settlements that you can visit. You will really appreciate them. One of the first sites I ever visited when I first came to Australia, and in Ballarat, and I never forget the experience, beautiful experience. But coming back to the communication, knowing somebody else's culture and communication, that really brings down the bridges, isn't it? And
Yes.
helps people to understand one another before they start being upset and starting conflicting.
Exactly.
And fight one another, isn't it?
Exactly.
So literature has far more impact, and it's not just reading books and
Right.
and have the exposure to somebody else's story. It's a personal impact to communication as well.
Right.
Okay, and do you find the appreciation from your community about literature in our days compared to 20 years ago?
Well, I think it's a little bit harder to sell with students today. Some people call this generation a post-literate generation.
Yes.
In that, I find that I've had some students who really don't read very much. They read Facebook and they read their texts.
Absolutely,
but
this
not
is the language.
text.
Yes, yes.
And
yes.
and so it's a challenge, but a good one, in order to say, you know, you can lose yourself in this book. You can go places that you would never be able to go otherwise, and to get them involved in that, and to see that, reading isn't so bad after all.
Absolutely. The last question I would like to ask you, I've noticed that you believe in God, and I've noticed that the Nazarene University that you're working on is a Christian university. How do you value Christianity or your belief in God impacting your work?
Well, we all have a worldview,
Yes.
whether we have defined it or articulated it or not.
Yes.
And I think we all approach education with that particular worldview.
Yes.
And we like to look at the Christian worldview as foundational to what we learn. That doesn't mean that we don't learn the same things in physics or chemistry or literature that other people would if they had a different kind of perspective. But we look at it with a worldview that says that there is a God that loves you, there's a God that created you, that we were created for relationship. And that's why it's so important to learn about each other so that we can be in that right relationship with each other. And so that we look at what we do or as being foundational to what we do in the classroom.
That means your faith helps you even more into that intercultural education and literature that you teach to your students as well, and you're responsible for as well.
I think it makes it more valuable.
Absolutely.
It's not just valuable as something to learn to earn a buck, for example,
correct.
which is $1.
Yes.
I don't know if you say that word here or not, but that it is something that can be life-changing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. It was wonderful to talk to you, and also because you did not only talk about education, but you have your personal reflection to it, and we really appreciate that. You're watching NAT, and we're going to be back next week, same time.